So tell us, what is Culture Shift Labs? What is Culture Shifting Weekend?
So, we're in the management consulting space. We bring together leaders in technology, innovation, and social impact to enable deals and collaborations. We spent months, maybe even a year, coming up with the right name. That's how important we wanted it to have this power, right? This gravitas. But I was just sick and tired of writing these incredible papers, presenting them to the government and the politicians and the policymakers, and it just went nowhere. So I decided to do something about it, invest in the people I claim need it the most and deserve it the most.
And we're back. Welcome to the Omi Show, where we bring you authentic insight into the world of finance, pop culture, tech, and business news. Our guest, Andrea Hoffman, is a trailblazer, a strategist, and a driving force in the worlds of diversity and innovation. Andrea has been at the forefront of championing diversity and inclusion, sharing her expertise with Fortune 500 companies, tech giants, investors, nonprofits, and private clients. Through Culture Shift Labs, she has empowered C-suite executives and their teams across diverse industries, unlocking opportunities that lead to both social and financial growth. Her impact extends beyond the boardroom and has influenced leaders globally. Join us as we explore her journey and insights into driving positive innovations through diversity and innovation. Welcome to the Omi Show, Andrea Hoffman. How you doing?
I'm well. Who's that person? I want to meet her. She sounds really cool.
I love everybody's response to me reading their bio, because for me, I think when you speak a lot or you're on a lot of panels, and some people read it so boring and they're just like, "Oh yeah, covered by this news outlet,"
Right.
and they don't give any flair to it. And I'm like, I'm so much more exciting than you
Yeah,
are
we need a
reading
little flavor. Yeah, that was good. That was good.
that. All right, so you could be doing anything in the world. You could be sailing the seven seas. You could be climbing Mount Everest. You could be opening up orphanages across the world. Why did you start Culture Shift Labs, which essentially is the creator of Culture Shift Summit?
Exactly. I am one of those people that I'm just naturally inclined to follow my gut. Some people have that voice in their head or in the back of their head, and they just kind of ignore it in all kinds of situations, right? It could be dating, it could be work, it could be friends. I've always just sort of naturally, organically followed that. It's like I'm compelled to, and I can't help myself. And so I got exposed to particular industries and audiences, and my mind was blown, and it's been blown ever since. And that was 26 years ago.
26 years ago. Wow. So where did it start, right? Because I think one, love the name. So I'm curious as to how you came to naming it Culture Shift, Culture Shifting, Culture Shift Weekend. Like there's a whole brand around it. And it came into my awareness a few years back, as I've gotten grown more in the realm of investment, innovation, and working with my company, Black Girl Ventures. And so I'm curious about was there a moment where you're taking private clients, you're consulting, you're doing that, all of that work to, diversity inclusion. What caused you to really turn it into a summit, a weekend even? Because for those out there, let's take a step back, because some people may be just new to hearing about it. So tell us, what is Culture Shift Labs? What is Culture Shifting Weekend? What is it exactly?
Yeah. So kind of riffing off of the first question and then answering these others. Um, in terms of the name, so there's a gentleman out there. I consider him an influencer. He's an incredible, businessman and innovator and visionary. His name is James Andrews. This is probably the first time I'm saying this publicly. And him and I were supposed to partner, and we spent months, maybe even a year, coming up with the right name. That's how important we wanted it to have this power, right? This gravitas. And every week we would have a call and we'd be like, what about this name? And what about that name? Like, no, that's not quite right. It was like hiring our own branding agency, but we were the branding agency. And finally, one day, different words, kind of, we salvaged them from different sessions. And then finally, different
Mm.
words from those different sessions, we were like, that's it, because it reflects exactly what where our head is at, what's needed in this moment. And I think it conveys what we're trying to do on its own, like the car that sells itself, right?
Mm.
And so it was really, really important to us, like the name of it. So that's one. I actually started off, my company was called Diversity Affluence when I first launched. And that was after I left corporate America. And that was about almost 17 years ago. Um, and this was a complete accident. I did not intend to start a company. I was just trying to consult to figure out my very deliberate next move, because I had been so traumatized in corporate America.
Mm.
It was, if you want to put me in a place where I don't belong, put me in corporate America. And I don't follow the rules. I'm a visionary. I have all these ideas, and it was just like, who's this crazy person? And so it started off as Diversity Affluence. I wrote a book called $50 Billion Boss with Len Burnett at the time, because as I left the business to consumer industry, which is where I started, and I was an expert in multicultural marketing, and then ultimately became an expert in target marketing specifically for affluent Black consumers. Right. So I started my career in business to consumer. And what that was born out of was helping the brand at the time. I was working on the account on the agency side for Mercedes-Benz. And our role as a team was to help them find new markets and new business opportunities. And so then I became a target marketing expert. And it just so happened
Mm.
that research from Yankelovic at the time is what they were called. They were one of the top, nation's top research organizations. It basically said your next consumer are not white. And I looked at the research, and I looked at this endless, it just seemed like this endless, like an infinity pool, right? It was like this endless opportunities. And I got incredibly excited. I think my life changed at that moment, and a couple of others prior. So started out Diversity Affluence because I was in the luxury space with affluent consumers, whether it was banking or, consumer goods. And then when I left corporate, I just wanted to extend that and consult until I found my next move. And came up with, a couple of years later, not expecting to have my own business, decided that I was going to start an initiative called Culture Shift Labs. Right, we were working on it behind the scenes. It was like a tiny initiative within the bigger, and it was the intersection of business technology and demographic shifts. And that was sort of like, an innovation lab, consulting, service. And when we went into pitch, companies were like, forget about this other stuff. I want that. I want this culture shift. And we flipped it, and the other stuff ultimately went away. So we're in the management consulting space. Diversity and innovation firm is how we categorize ourselves within the management consulting space. So it's a niche. And we help, clients with advising, strategy, and activation are our three pillars. The last piece, to answer your question, going back when it was Diversity Affluence, uh, Len Burnett and I, who wrote Black is a New Green, Marketing to Affluent African Americans, at the time wanted to bring to life the consumer and how they were a super consumer. So we decided to put luxury brands in front of this super consumer audience by doing an awards event. And the awards event ultimately became Culture Shifting Weekends, as we wanted to solve for other problems. Like you, as we got smarter, learned the industry, learned what problems needed to be solved or inequality gaps need to be narrowed. So it evolved from the Diversity Affluence Brunch to Culture Shifting Weekends, and now they're called Summits. And that was 14 years ago.
So I'm curious, how do you decide? And so okay, so who is the target audience for Culture Shifting Summit?
So the summits are, we bring together leaders in technology, innovation, and social impact to enable deals and collaborations in service of wealth creation. So it's a deal making summit, and the audience are people that can invest in founders and venture fund managers, and somehow hire executives of color, right? Specifically Black and Latino and Hispanic, that could hire them, invest in them, acquire their company, put them on a board, put them in the C-suite. So we curate the room very deliberately to sort of create that natural chemistry and connection. So it's decision makers and check writers.
How do you decide? Like, it's invite only?
It's invite only for the sole purpose of not to be exclusionary, but we want to make sure we're driving the kinds of outcomes that we promise our community that we're going to, produce. And so that requires it, to be a certain type of person in the room. And it's that's in addition to the day job. So the day job is the core business. But yeah, it's highly curated, and we've gotten $1 billion into the hands of the community over the last 8 years that we've been measuring outcomes, despite it not being an exact science.
Exactly. I was just about to ask, how do you measure success? How do you measure success?
It's a little old school. I mean, it's very high touch, and we believe in high touch because the community deserves high touch. Not everything should be you press a button and you're on Mars, or AI, or we actually you know care and feed those relationships. So very, very high touch.
Okay, okay. So the book, $50 billion Boss, um, what does it mean to be a $50 billion boss?
It means that Black women are incredibly powerful on multiple levels. And I could just put a period there and just like drop the mic.
100%.
Politics, consumerism, the purchasing of cars, the purchasing of houses, they influence everything, and they actually open their wallets for the other stuff. And so there was a report by American Express many years ago that said Black women contribute $50 billion to the American economy annually. And we were inspired by that figure. And this was, again, several years ago. It's probably even more now. And so there was a woman in that wanted to get introduced to me because she had read my first book. And she got introduced and said, I have an idea for a book. Would you co-author it with me? And I couldn't at the time. I was incredibly busy. And she waited about a year, and we ultimately wrote the book. So, and we're writing a follow-up to it that extends that. But yeah, Black women are incredibly powerful.
From your experience, and why do you think that the numbers are either shifting so slowly in terms of investment in women in general and in Black and brown people, or just not shifting at all? Like, you've been on multiple realms of this challenge, I think, in your work. Why do you think that things are either moving very slowly or not moving at all?
They're moving. I just sometimes wonder if they're moving in circles.
Mm.
Right. So I asked a friend one time a question. He said, listen, at least if you're falling forward, it's a forward motion. If you're falling, it's a forward motion. But, are the numbers moving tiny, tiny? Are they moving in the way that they should? The volume, velocity? Absolutely not. We haven't really unpacked the why. One of the things I will say is that the more deliberate you are about putting the right people in the right room and connecting them and being very deliberate about driving outcomes, which is what we do at the summits and also for our clients, is I think you'll defy, conventional wisdom, which is inaccurate, right? All the facts are inaccurate. There aren't any, we can't find any. So if you're deliberate about putting these rooms together and you have the allies, right? And you have the advocates, and then you have the people that are deserving of the money. If you're doing it almost like trying to be, mapping it, trying to be exact, you'll get outcomes. You just need to do it more and more, and you need the resources to do it at scale. But, I'll tell you a quick story. In Silicon Valley, the first year we did the summit, it was called the Weekends at the time. There was a gentleman that walked in. He was in the biotech space. White executive in Silicon Valley, very powerful, very accomplished. And he was invited by somebody, and he walked in the room and he said, who? And it was about 200 Black leaders in tech, innovation, social impact in the Bay Area. Some flew in from other parts of the country. It was about 200 people in the room, and he said, these people aren't from around here. And his friend looked at him, who invited him, and said, These about 90% of the room were locals. And he said, I've lived here my whole life. I've never seen a room like this. Are you sure that 3/4 of the people didn't fly in and that's why I've never seen a room like this? And he said, no, these are your neighbors. These are your colleagues. And he was absolutely blown away. So seeing is believing. So the more deliberate you are and the more regular you do it, the more you can provide conventional wisdom. It's just not going to change overnight. But, I don't care about the naysayers. I don't care about the non-believers. We want to find the believers and put them in the room.
Yeah, I'm working in this space now for 7 years, and I think that it's just interesting. I agree that we're not yet having the conversation about what the true problem underlining challenges are, which are just social challenges, right? Like what you just spoke to is a social challenge. It's not as much of a like political challenge or intellectual, like a academic challenge as much. It's literally a social challenge. This person probably does not navigate outside of their circle of people that they know and trust. And it's also true that they probably don't see anybody. And I'm not saying like physically actually, but I mean like literally because of just glossed over focus on whatever you're focusing on. You're walking around, you don't even see other people that are near you. And in the no, go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
You don't see those people. And so I wrote a paper for the DC Policy Center about this, like just the simplicity of it. Like we don't have to go deeply into like, shaking the fist at history in a way, but if we just zoom out and go, oh my God, for years, like years, not just 1, 2, but like for years, I couldn't ride beside you in the train. That simple fact has caused us to be so distant from each other just in a very human way. And we don't know how to solve it, right? We don't know how to come closer because it's not the numbers, right? Like we know the numbers say invest in women. We know the numbers say work with Black and brown folks. We know like countless numbers of reports at this point.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
the diversity and innovation challenge that we continue to have, when you couple those together, like diversity and innovation together, how are you seeing people uniquely positioning themselves as you are to hammer away at some of the challenges?
I mean, there's different advocacy groups, right? There are people solving different parts of the issue, right? And it's a long chain of issues that need to be tackled, right? You have some people doing sort of the policy, government. You have some people doing the sort of foundation, getting them to, think differently about philanthropy and venture philanthropy. You have people having their own events, bringing folks together, right? And saying, hey, listen, we can't change the statistics, significantly, but what we can do is get people in the room and get deals and get checks written in real time. Because, I was talking to Roland Fryer, right, the renowned Harvard professor, and I didn't know this, but he's on Fund 3, is a venture fund. And I said, what made you start that? And he said, I was just sick and tired of writing these incredible papers, presenting them to the government and the politicians and the policymakers, and it just went nowhere. So I decided to do something about it, start a venture fund and invest in the people I claim need it the most and deserve it the most. So, I think there's a misnomer that like nobody's doing anything and companies are pulling back.
Right. Agreed.
But there, honestly, if I was independently wealthy or somebody gave us a huge grant, I would do an enormous amount of research or have my team do an enormous amount of research of all the initiatives that are out there. The question is, how are they working and to what degree? And I think I would caution everybody to stop saying like, have we solved the problem, right? Because we're not going to solve the problem, but who's getting checks? Where are those success stories? And how do we amplify that as much as we're amplifying the problem? Because I often give this analogy. If you're in a relationship and you're constantly providing negative reinforcement, honey, you never take out the garbage, honey, you never bring home flowers, honey, you never say I love you, you don't say I love. If all you do is negative, that relationship is going to deteriorate and it's not going to produce fruit, right? If at the same level, we constantly produce these success stories. The, you know, Doug McNeely's at BlackRock, right? Who's, was the highest performer at, there before he moved over to the Carlyle Group. Or, Nick Brathwaite, who's on fund 5 or 6, it's $500 million fund. Or the Black entrepreneurs that had successful exits, right? The Paris Wallace, Clarence Wooten, Michael Ellison. So, long-winded way to say, the more that we push out success stories that are not the most obvious, athletes and entertainers, the Amias of the world, I think the more that you'll find believers and say, I feel like I'm missing out. Leaders will say, I feel like I'm missing out. And that's what we do on the consulting side, is create an army of believers, because we put the resources and relationships and resources in front of them.
Oh my goodness. I have so many thoughts there, and I want to keep this conversation going, but we got to take a quick break at least. I mean, because I want to talk about who we trying to convince. I don't even know that it's a matter of pushing the stories out and then somehow it would turn over. I really think the finance world, like the systematic pieces of it, has to shift if we want to see shifts. Because if not, then we're positioning the sort of white guys who don't get it to say, we'll keep showing you, we'll keep showing you, we'll keep showing you, versus actually innovating and creating new systems that, regardless of their existence, won't. It's not a matter of them being convinced. I think that is, can we live in a world where it's not a matter of a white man having to be convinced, is a real big, big, big question and a real big problem. But hold on. Stay right here. We'll be right back, because I want to give you opportunity to respond to that, and then we'll wrap up. Y'all keep it locked right here. You listen to the Omi Show. We gotta take a quick break. You don't want to miss out. This conversation is amazing. We're talking to Andrea Hoffman, the founder of Culture Shift Labs and ultimately Culture Shifting Summit. Keep it locked right here. We'll be right back. We are having amazing conversations. I'm here with Andrea Hoffman, and she is awesome. Just all the knowledge that she's bringing. I'm so excited to be able to bring it to the Omi Show. We are talking about the hard stuff right now. We're talking about the challenges that come up in diversity and innovation. And yeah, I'm a serial optimist. I don't know about you, Andrea, but I believe that, there is a way, that things become better. One of the things I mentioned before we went to break is the idea that we somehow got to convince the white guys, and it's so hard to get away from that positioning. And so I definitely want to hear your thoughts on that. I want to make sure you get an opportunity to respond.
Right. First of all, serial optimist, I'm using that. So if I need to pay you a fee for every time I use it, you might want to trademark that. So the good news is, being a serial optimist myself, right? But I'm also a white woman serving the Black community and the Latino and Hispanic community. So I recognize how to use that white privilege, in ways that serve the community that I'm completely dedicated to and have been for 27 years. And I'm always thinking about, like, how do we tweak that? And how do we get to yes? And how do we get more checks in the community? I'm like obsessed with outcomes, right? And driving my team crazy because they don't necessarily always understand, like, why I'm making that decision. But it's like, no, 7 more LPs will be in the room if you do this and this, right? Or the LPs limited partners for venture funds. But the good news is, to answer your question, there are a lot more women in positions of power in corporate America, and hooray, because they are also driving this. They're driving this, like, I can't tell you how many incredibly badass women I've met over the last several years that are got sort of pulled into this work, right? Somehow, in addition to their day job. And so they're there, like the mad scientists in the lab, trying to figure out the exact right formula to convince or to present in a way that would be consumed and actioned on to the white leaders or to other leaders. It might be a South Asian female or male, but generally speaking, and a lot of times, the white leaders just need the right roadmap, right? They need the right methodology. They need the right body of research. Maybe nobody's presented it to them in the right way, or it's a timing issue. But all that to say, there are a lot more women in positions that are driving this. And so that's great. And there are a lot more, believe it or not, white leaders like Jamie Dimon, which, by the way, most people don't know. Jamie Dimon is Greek.
Mm-hmm.
You think maybe he understands immigration? Do you think he understands minority groups being marginalized to a degree, right? He may not talk about it. Or how about this? How about Dan Schulman, the poster child for pay equity, which he achieved 2 years earlier? I don't know how many years earlier. His team said it's going to take this long. He said, cut that in half. We can't. We did the risk assessment. He said, get it done sooner. There was another guy at Amazon, another white male leader, and he said to his team, I want whatever it was, gender equity within the next year. And he said, my job as a leader is to hire the right people, collaborate with them on the vision, and then let them go achieve that and get out of their way. And he did. And they made it. This is what we're going to do. You all figure it out. And they did it. So if we don't tell the stories of the allies, the Kapoors, Mitch and Frida Kapor, or the Dan Schulmans, or the Jamie Dimons, but there are a lot. Have you ever heard of the company Cadence?
I don't think so.
Yeah, new company, way post George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the other brutalities and tragedies. They just launched recently a $50 million racial equity fund. Right. So you're seeing a lot of these things happen later because people didn't want to jump on the bandwagon. They wanted to be thoughtful. They didn't want it to seem opportunistic. They wanted to be really deliberate and wait for the timing. And there's a lot of other initiatives like that. So the pressure's on people.
Yes.
You better put up or shut up.
That's right. I love that. So what can we expect from the 2023 Culture Shifting Summit? Is coming up, right?
Yeah. Every year we get smarter with feedback from the community that attend, from advisors and my advisory board, and just observing, right? Sleeping is not so much fun for me, so I do a lot of research and, looking at are we solving it, with the best practices, what's next? How do we pole vault this 10 years ahead? How do we get more investors in the room? So as we get feedback, we think more and more deliberately about how to get the right people in the room. And every year, the summit has at least 50% of the room are new people to the community. Deliberately, right? They could be an entrepreneur, they could be an investor, they could be an executive that people should know about, and they've been flying under the radar and they want to keep it that way, but we've convinced them, no, come in this room, and then they become believers. So what's next is that the more deliberate we can be about active investors in the room, the more outcomes we'll have for the community. And it's, that's really important to us. So the next one is New York, which is very specifically for venture fund founders, GPs, general partners, and LPs, limited partners that invest in them. And then Miami is broader. We have entrepreneurs pitching, and we have A-Rod speaking about how he made the transition. We have athletes as investors. We have corporate venture, which we're doubling down on, corporate venture and family office, because that is an unknown entity that could co-invest alongside GPs, venture funds, and they can invest in founders. And so I'll just give you a little glimmer of hope to give you an example specifically. So about 2 months ago, we decided that the corporate venture world, also known as CVC, was a world that we wanted to build out so that there was hope and more investors out in the community, and take our 1,500 investors in the network and take it up to 3,000. And so that was another way to do that. We went from 30 CVCs in the network to 300, over 300 in a month and a half.
I love this. We could talk all night because I got more questions. So this definitely won't be the last time we have you. We'll have to figure out later, especially we'd love to hear after the summit has happened, what are your reflections and what are your learning points? I know as an organizer, you barely get time to enjoy it. And so I do understand that as well. And hopefully maybe we'll get to do something at the summit, or I'll be able to be there this time. But
Let's
I
do
think
it. Let's have you live from the Culture Shifting Summit in Miami.
I love that. And you know what? We should talk because to your point about family offices and corporate venture, there's not a lot of conversation about DAFs. So we have a DAF, this is where I invest from. And there I don't like, even when I talk to other GPs or LPs, they're like, oh, like I'm thinking about it, but we don't have one. Or like, could you tell us how you are investing from your DAF? Like what? And so I'm like, oh, people don't really know this avenue of investing as much unless you're in the philanthropy world. So it'd be interesting to have that track. So I'm curious. But we will stay in touch for sure. We'll have you back. Where should people reach you, follow you, support?
Absolutely. So it's on Twitter, it's Andrea Diversity. I'm not as active there. I'm more active on
You're not on
LinkedIn.
X?
Now's a good time to kind of transition off. I'm trying to figure out how to move more and more away from being, in abusive environments with sociopaths. But that's just on my to-do list. LinkedIn is best. So Andrea Hoffman on LinkedIn, and then follow Culture Shift Labs. We post there as well, and we have some incredible videos and educational videos on YouTube under Culture Shift Labs. So please follow us there and watch all of that, and join us and sign up for our newsletter, our e-newsletter at cultureshiftlabs.com, where we have really, really great content that should inspire you and your family and your community, and hopefully people that are writing checks to those communities.
Absolutely. That part.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Write big checks. How's that?
Yes. That should be a t-shirt, right? Big checks. Culture shifting logo on it. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate this time and the conversation. It's been very enlightening, light, and just cool to like dig into these things, especially with someone of your expertise who's been in the industry for so long. So thank you so much for joining me.
And thank you for all that you do and for having me on.
For sure.